What were the Silk Roads? Well, that's what I'm going to be answering today in today's video. This is, um, yeah. Okay, the Silk Roads were a network of trade routes between Eastern and Western worlds, mainly Asia and Europe, that stretched about 4,000 miles. The routes were used and developed for roughly 1,500 years. Routes ran from China all through Asia all the way to Rome and beyond. What was traded along the Silk Roads? So, this is the story of silk, which is so the strangest thing happened as Empress Xu, which is wife of the Yellow Emperor of China at the time, sat underneath a mulberry tree drinking tea. A cocoon fell into the cup and began to unravel, revealing a small white worm inside. Though it was a cocoon that enthralled the Empress, the strands that came apart in her tea were white, beautiful, and caught the rays of the sun. This is the legend of the Chinese discovery of silk. Silk was made by silkworms, which were only found in China and parts of Japan, which meant that people in the ancient world could only buy it from these countries. Silk as a material was wonderfully light, strong, and comfortable, and seen as a symbol of status because it was very valuable. For more than 1,000 years, silk was the gift that the Emperor of China would give to his neighbors. The use of silk became so important that the illegal trade of this material was written into the Chinese law. China had control over all of the silk and was very selective over who they sold it to. They charged a very high price. The largest silk route in the ancient world led from China straight to the heart of the Persian Empire, who grew to love silk and viewed it as a prized possession. The caravans of traders would carry silk as everyone wanted it, and it was also very light. It was so prized that it was often used instead of money. The silk caravans would leave the city of Yin and travel southwest through China to Guan, which translates as the Jade Gate, the only gate out of the Great Wall of China that leads across the Taklamakan Desert. The Chinese caravans and Sogdian traders, which also known as the nomadic tribes, carried the silk east to the markets of the city of Bactra and sold it there. Silk was traded across the ancient world, with merchants coming from as far as Babylon, Rome, and Carthage, which is modern day Tunisia, to be a part of this trade. In return, they would bring goods from their own lands, which were new to the Chinese people, such as spices from Persia, animal furs from Russia. Olive oil and wine were traded from Italy, and Roman glassware has been found in the tombs of rich Chinese merchants, evidencing its part in the trade along the Silk Roads. At around 200 BC, the Chinese emperor was worried about the vicious nomadic tribes living to the north of China, which is modern day Mongolia. The infamous Zhu, who believed to drink blood, however, he realized that the horses were much stronger and larger than the Chinese horses. He even described them as heavenly, and so he struck a deal with Zhongzhou. The horse for the silk trade was very important for further developing the network of the Silk Roads. It is important to think of the silk trade as a two-way process. The Chinese traded silk, but often in return for items they thought were highly valuable, which included information about the Western world and its customs. They also traded more than silk. Paper was invented in China, possibly more than 2,000 years ago. Paper was used to wrap up medicines and spices, but later used to write down and share ideas. Gunpowder and the precious stone jade were also valuable commodities. Enslaved people were tragically common trade good all the way through the Silk Roads network. Raiding armies would take captives and sell them to private traders. Slaves were sold in the faraway ports and capitals from Dublin, Ireland in the west to Shandong in eastern China. The slaves became servants, entertaining and clerks for royal courts. Silk Road historian Susan Whitfield argues that the trading of the slaves was just as common and important to the economy of the silks. So, what can we learn from the objects of the Silk Roads? So, um, one of the objects was that historians have found is a bronze coin of Roman Emperor Constantius II from 337 to 361, found in Kalgalik, Xinjiang, China. Bronze was a metal that the Romans liked to make things with. And another thing is a 14th century depiction of a Silk Road caravan. A glass bowl from near Alexandria in 100 BC was also found. It was found in the tomb South China. It would have been made as an everyday drinking cup and not as a luxury item. But far away in South China, it was rare and considered exotic and luxury. Another thing was a two-humped Bactrian camel from China with a slave girl resting on it. This sculpture is made from a terracotta and has been dated from the 8th century. The sculpture on the side of a building in Venice of an Asian merchant. He is carrying lots of goods. His nose is black because it has been rubbed so much for luck. Another one was a Chinese warrior made of terracotta with a military horse. This sculpture is one of the hundreds found in Jing'an, a major city in China at the start of the Silk Roads. These horses were born in the nomadic region of Mongolia, not China. Don't want to make that mistake. And another thing they found was a sculpture found near Iran from a wealthy city along the Silk Roads called Palmyra. It looks like the sculptures in Rome, but the people are wearing Chinese silk. This is a family wearing precious jewels and holding grapes, which were expensive. It was made in the 1st century. Okay, so what have we learnt so far? So just to clear up your mind a bit, the Silk Road wasn't actually a single road, it was a network of roads. The nomadic tribes used horses that helped them travel. The nomadic tribes came in contact with the civilizations of Greece and India. What did this contact between different civilizations lead to? Well, as we have learnt throughout history, it of course led to war. The most important part of the Silk Road was likely Persia, which is modern day Iran, and a consequence of Alexander's conquest of the Persian Empire was that trades and goods, well, that's what he earned. He got lots of trades and goods. The Chinese emperor in the 2nd century was the Han Emperor, and the Chinese discoverer in the 2nd century were the Chinese discovered exotic goods such as silk and jade, which they traded for horses and cotton with Persia. The Chinese Silk Roads eventually reached Rome, which is the capital of Italy if you're not that well, if you don't know your capitals. The Silk Road remained even as the Roman and Chinese emperors fell because this was because of trade, and the religions that spread was one of the religions was Buddhism, which spread between India and China, and Islam spread between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and basically the entire Arabic Peninsula and South Asian countries such as Pakistan and Bangladesh. Gunpowder spread to China all the way to the Western world. Um, so just so let's learn some more things then. So the Silk Roads, these are the routes of religions and ideas. Just as goods flowed along the routes of the Silk Roads, so did ideas. And among the most powerful ideas in existence were those concerning the divine, trying to understand God, the world, and the meaning of life. There were many alternative religions to choose from. Religions that were Indic in origin, which means they were from the country of modern day India, which were Hinduism and Buddhism, spread along the Silk Roads to compete with religions that had roots in Persia. From further west came Judaism, Christianity, and later Islam. Each religion was was to exercise huge influence. Faiths often converted one another. Alexander the Great and his armies, which was around 331 BC, brought their religion with them from Greece during the rule, setting up temples all over the heart of Asia. This challenged Buddhists, who long before Alexander in around 600 BC had spread their beliefs from northern India. As a result, the Buddhists began to build shrines and temples of their own. Around the first century, the spread of Buddhism along trade routes accelerated rapidly thanks to monks, travelers, and above all, Sogdian merchants. These merchants took long journeys deep into the heart of Asia and China, trading high value goods. Many carved the name of Buddha into rocks along the way, hoping for protection. The spread of Buddhism led to impressive monuments, such as the complex of cave monasteries in western China and at Dunhuang. At a similar time, when Buddhism was spreading in the East, after the death of Jesus in around 30 AD, Christianity spread along the Silk Roads. Despite persecution, followers of Jesus and his teachings made their way from Jerusalem across Asia. Communities now living in the cities in the East, such as Babylon, which is now Iraq, and later in what is now Sri Lanka and in China, converted to Christianity. Soon, Christian communities were so large that they needed bishops and priests. Christianity spread into Europe, to Ephesus, Corinth, and Rome. It also gathered large numbers and followed in Asia and North Africa too. Countries like Egypt, where Alexandria was, still have a large Christian population today. In the 4th century, just before a big battle, the Roman Emperor Constantine saw a vision of a cross. He promptly converted to Christianity and won the battle too. He was an enthusiastic promoter of his new faith and was adopted by the Roman Empire and his city Constantinople. As Christianity spread across the Roman Empire and Europe, it gradually became more organized with a set of recognized beliefs. Like much of Asia, Arabia was a noisy place when it came to religions and beliefs. It was in this region, in around 610 AD, a war raged in the north, but a merchant named Muhammad retreated to a cave to contemplate, not far from the city of Mecca. Muhammad reported hearing revelations of God, which went on to form the Quran. He attracted a small group of followers from his hometown of Mecca who began to practice a new religion, which became known as Islam. However, powerful people in Mecca felt a little threatened by Muhammad's popularity and opposed him. He took his followers to Medina in 622, where he built an Islamic community around the mosque they constructed there. Before long, Muhammad had gained so many followers that he was able to return to Mecca and conquer the city. The people of the surrounding areas soon became Muslims, and Islam spread across the Arabian Peninsula by the Silk Roads. Arab Muslim armies conquered the great cities, such as Alexandria in Egypt in 646, and of the later Persian Empire, the city Constantinople, which is in modern day Turkey, also known as Istanbul, in 718, of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire. The religion spread rapidly along the Silk Roads, through the Middle East and North Africa to reach Spain, Central Asia, and India by 750. Control of the Silk Route now passed into the hands of the Arabs and subsequent Islamic dynasties. In 750, the Abbasids seized power of Islamic Empire and built a new capital, Baghdad, in Iraq. After defeating a Chinese army, a large numbers of Chinese craftsmen were taken prisoner, amongst whom was silk workers and paper makers. Knowledge of the techniques spread westwards, reaching Baghdad by 794. This period is sometimes called the Golden Age of Islam, and the city of Baghdad became the greatest city on earth until 1258, where the Mongol armies from the east destroyed Baghdad and ended the Abbasid rule. So, how did early empires develop the Silk Roads? The first Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great was the most powerful empire on earth around 559 BC. It united three important sites of the early human civilization in the ancient world: Mesopotamia, Egypt's Nile Valley, and India's Indus Valley. The Persians were the first people to establish regular routes of communication between the three continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. The Persians built over 1,600 miles of paved roads in order to create better trade links between the countries inside and outside the empire. Darius the Great called this the Royal Road. They also built canals which allowed Persia to trade with countries such India for ivory and most importantly China for silk. This made Persia the wealthiest empire in the world at the time. The most interesting thing about the Persian Empire was their willingness to accept other cultures. If they found a nation or a people along the Silk Road whose ideas or technologies they liked or thought were better than their own, the Persians had no problem accepting these new ideas. The Persians became a very knowledgeable empire based on all the traveling and trading going along the Silk Roads. Meanwhile, in 336 BC, Alexander of Macedon became the king of Macedon and Greece after his father was stabbed to death by his own bodyguard. Alexander knew that the world's wealth lay to the east, along the Silk Road, which ran through Persia. Alexander had grown up hearing stories of Persian culture and wealth and was fascinated by it. He loved war and conquering other countries and wanted to control the Persian Empire. And so, in 333 BC, Alexander crossed into modern-day Turkey and through diplomacy and encouraged the major Persian city of Saras to surrender, saving many lives. He continued with conquest and moved his army south to capture the city of Tyre in 332 BC. However, this was not an easy victory for Alexander. It took over a year, and so Alexander burnt the whole city and its people down in anger. Further south, Alexander moved into Egypt, where he began to build the great city of Alexandria in 331 BC. Later that year, in modern-day Afghanistan, Alexander finally met the Persian king Darius III in battle at Gaugamela. Darius's Persian army had over 200,000 men, whilst Alexander only had 47,000. The Persian army also had elephants. Nonetheless, the Macedonians crushed the Persian army and forced Darius into hiding. Alexander then marched into Babylon and named himself the King of Asia. He moved his capital city to Babylon and began accepting many Persian ideas as his own, and building temples in the heart of Asia. 2 years in 329 BC, Alexander had grown restless. He marched his forces east from Babylon through the mountain range in North India and captured the full city of Bactara. Alexander now controlled the full length of the Silk Road from the borders of China to mainland Europe. But Alexander still wasn't finished. He invaded India in 326 BC. However, it was here in 323 BC that Alexander died. Bloody fighting across his empire followed, which led to the Macedonian Empire falling apart. Many lands kept the Greek influence Alexander introduced, and this is known as the Hellenistic period, which means to identify with the Greeks. However, despite Alexander's conquests, the Persian Empire did in part survive, with different dynasties taking over the area of modern-day Iran. The later Persians and the Roman Empire often fought over land that both sides wanted, as they shared a border. The Persians lost some battles against the Romans, yet won others, such as the Battle of Kahare in modern-day Turkey in 53 BC, where they surrounded the Roman army and massacred them, even pouring molten gold down the Roman leader's throat. Although at this time the Romans were beginning to grow a mighty empire, the Persian rule of modern-day Iran did hold on power. It wasn't until Islamic Arab armies attacked Babylon in 636 AD that the Persian Empire was no more. We'll hear about that another time. Okay, so many people do think the Persian Empire was the greatest empire of all time, which is why I wanted to know if you like this video, like, subscribe, and do you think the Persian Empire is the greatest empire of all time? Goodbye.